Nobody believes me when I tell this story, so let me just get the absurd part out of the way first. Yes, there was a dragon. Yes, it was real. Yes, it had apparently been asleep under a mountain in Colorado since before the United States was even a country. And yes, we woke it up on purpose because we were completely, catastrophically out of better options. My name's Danny Kowalski. I'm a National Guard sergeant. And I want to be very clear that none of this was in my job description when I enlisted. Started on a Tuesday, which felt insulting somehow. Alien invasions should have the decency to happen on a weekend. The Krivex Collective, that's what they called themselves once we finally got a translation working, came down over the Rockies with about 40 warships and a plan that, frankly, made no sense to any of us until much later. They wanted the mountain range. Specifically the mountain range. Not the cities, not the coastlines, not the population centers you'd expect an invading force to prioritize. Just the Rockies, and they were willing to level anything that got in the way of taking them. Command had no idea why. I had no idea why. My squad definitely had no idea why, though Private Ruiz did suggest it was probably about the skiing, which got him yelled at during a briefing that was, in fairness, already going badly. Here's the thing about fighting an alien invasion with conventional weapons. It does not work particularly well. We found this out fast and expensively over the first 3 days of the invasion, when every attempt to push the Krivex ground forces back from the foothills resulted in casualties we absolutely could not sustain. Their tech was better. Their shields were better. Their weapons made our best tank look like a toy you'd buy a toddler. What they didn't have, apparently, was any historical records about what actually lived under Grayback Mountain, because if they had, I genuinely believe they would have picked a different invasion target. The dragon thing came from a guy named Walter Higgins, 78 years old, lifetime resident of a town so small it didn't have a stoplight, and the self-appointed keeper of what he called the family secret. He showed up at our forward command post on day 4, walked straight past 2 very confused MPs, and told a full colonel that his family had been guarding a sleeping dragon under Grayback Mountain for 11 generations and that now might be a good time to consider waking it up. I want you to understand that everyone in that command tent thought he was having some kind of stress-induced breakdown. Everyone except one very tired intelligence officer who'd apparently seen the classified file. Turns out, and I'm still not fully over this part, the United States government has known about the dragon since 1943. There's a file. There's an actual official file buried under 70 years of classification about a massive, ancient, apparently very much alive creature sleeping under a mountain in Colorado. Nobody had ever had a reason to wake it up before. Mostly because, according to the file, waking it up seemed like a genuinely terrible idea under normal circumstances. Circumstances, by day 4 of an alien invasion that was steadily grinding through our defenses, were no longer normal. Colonel Ashworth looked at that file, looked at the casualty reports, looked at Walter Higgins standing there in a flannel shirt like he hadn't just upended everything we thought we knew about reality, and said the 6 words that started this whole ridiculous chapter of American military history. All right. Let's go wake up a dragon. I got voluntold for the escort team, because apparently being nearby when someone makes a terrible decision means you get to participate in it. Walter led us up a service road that wasn't on any map I'd ever seen, deep into Grayback Mountain, through a cave system his family had apparently been quietly maintaining access to for over 2 centuries. Just so we're clear, I said, somewhere around the 3rd hour of hiking through increasingly narrow tunnels. You're telling me your family has known about a literal dragon this whole time, and the plan was just, never mention it unless things got really bad? Pretty much, Walter said, completely unbothered. Grandpa always said you don't wake a sleeping dragon for a bad harvest. You wake it up when the whole country's on the line. I did not find that as reassuring as he seemed to think it was. The chamber, when we finally reached it, was enormous. Big enough to make our flashlights feel useless against the darkness, filled with rock formations that had clearly grown around something that had been sitting there for a very, very long time. And there, curled up in the center of it all, was easily the largest living creature I have ever seen in my entire life, covered in scales the color of old iron, with a wingspan that, even folded, stretched wider than a football field. It wasn't breathing, or it was breathing so slowly that we couldn't detect it at first, and for one terrifying moment, I genuinely thought we'd hiked 3 hours into a mountain to look at a very impressive fossil. Then one enormous eye opened, and every single person in that chamber, myself very much included, took an involuntary step backward. Walter, to his eternal credit, did not step backward. He walked forward, right up toward a creature that could have eaten him in a single bite without noticing, and said something in a language I didn't recognize, old and formal sounding, the kind of thing that had clearly been passed down through generations specifically for this exact moment. The dragon's response was a sound that shook dust loose from the cave ceiling, deep and resonant, somewhere between a growl and something that, disturbingly, sounded almost like a question. "She's asking why we woke her," Walter translated, apparently fluent in ancient dragon, which was a sentence I never expected to think in my entire life. "Says it better be good. Tell her aliens are invading," I said. "Tell her they're already through the foothills." I have never seen an animal, creature, or being of any kind react the way that dragon reacted to the word aliens. Her entire posture changed, head snapping up, wings unfurling with a sound like sails catching wind. And when she spoke again, even without understanding the words, I understood the tone perfectly. She was angry, genuinely ancient, apocalyptically angry. "She wants to know," Walter said, listening carefully, "if these aliens know whose mountain this is." "I don't think they do," I said honestly. "I don't think anybody told them." The dragon made a sound that I am fairly confident was the draconic equivalent of a very unamused laugh. Getting a dragon out of a mountain, it turns out, is logistically complicated in ways nobody had adequately prepared for. The tunnel system that had comfortably fit 2 centuries of Higgins family visits was not built with a creature of her size in mind. She solved this problem herself in the most direct way possible, by simply clawing a new exit straight up through solid rock while the rest of us scrambled to get clear. I want to be very clear that watching several tons of ancient stone give way like wet paper in front of something with claws that size is an experience I will never fully process. We emerged onto the mountainside just as the sun was setting, which felt, honestly, a little too cinematic for a situation this genuinely insane. The Kryvex forces noticed her almost immediately. Their sensors, apparently calibrated for detecting ships, tanks, and conventional threats, had absolutely no framework for processing a living creature the size of a small aircraft launching itself off a mountainside under her own power. I watched, from a ridge about a mile back, as the first Kryvex patrol craft that got close enough to investigate simply stopped existing. One moment it was there, scanning, cautious. The next, it was a fireball tumbling down the mountainside, and the dragon hadn't even seemed to slow down. "Sir," I said into my radio, watching this unfold with the kind of numb disbelief that comes from your entire understanding of reality getting rearranged in real time, "I think she's annoyed." What followed over the next 6 hours can only be described as the single strangest battle in recorded military history, and I say that with complete confidence, having read quite a bit of recorded military history since. The Kryvex Collective, for all their advanced technology, had absolutely no contingency plan for an ancient, apex predator with fireproof scales and several centuries of pent-up frustration about being woken up early. Their shield technology, designed to stop kinetic weapons and energy blasts, did essentially nothing against claws the size of construction equipment and a bite force that turned one of their smaller warships into scrap metal in a single motion. I'm not saying she single-handedly won the entire war. That would be an exaggeration, and honestly, human forces did a lot of important work clearing ground troops while she focused on their air superiority. But she absolutely, completely, gloriously wrecked their air advantage, and that changed everything about the fight that followed. Private Ruiz, watching alongside me from the ridge as the dragon tore through yet another Kryvex formation with what I can only describe as enthusiasm, turned to me and said with complete sincerity, "I take back what I said about the skiing thing. You should," I told him. "Also, you were still wrong about that." "Was I though?" he said, watching another enemy craft go down in flames. "Was I really?" I did not have a good response to that, mostly because at that point in the day, I had genuinely stopped expecting anything to make sense ever again. The Kryvex commander, whoever or whatever it was, apparently decided fairly quickly that a mountain range guarded by an angry ancient dragon was not worth whatever they'd originally invaded for. Their remaining forces began a full withdrawal by the following morning, pulling back off-world entirely within the week. We never did get a full answer on why they wanted the Rockies specifically. Walter had a few theories, mostly involving old family stories about things buried deeper than the dragon, which is a sentence that kept several people at command up at night for a while afterward. Personally, I've decided I don't need to know. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, especially the ones that involve the possibility of something even bigger than a dragon sleeping under Colorado. The dragon, for her part, did not go back to sleep after the invasion ended. She stuck around, apparently deciding that a few centuries of napping was enough for now, and took up an unofficial residence somewhere in the high peaks where hikers occasionally, very carefully, report seeing something enormous circling at altitude. The government's official position on the dragon remains, to this day, mostly classified, though Walter Higgins got some kind of honorary commendation that he framed and hung in his living room next to a photo of himself standing next to her, looking exactly as unbothered as he had that first day in the command tent. I asked him once if he was worried about what happens when she eventually decides Colorado isn't interesting enough anymore. He just shrugged, same as always. Grandpa always said, you don't worry about the dragon. The dragon worries about you when it matters. Otherwise, mind your business. I think about that advice a lot these days, especially now that I'm the one briefing new recruits on protocol for the increasingly weird stuff that's turned up since the invasion. Turns out an alien attack on American soil has a way of making people reconsider what else might be classified, sleeping, or otherwise quietly waiting under the surface of things. We're a strange country sometimes. We build the biggest weapons in the world, argue about budgets and policy and every conceivable detail of modern warfare, and then, when it really counts, when the situation is genuinely dire enough, apparently our best option is occasionally just an old man in a flannel shirt who knows how to talk to dragons. I don't know what that says about us, exactly. But I know the Kryvex collective hasn't come back. And I know that somewhere up in those mountains, something ancient and enormous is keeping an eye on things. That's good enough for me. Some days, honestly, that's the most reassuring thing I can think of. And